Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, August 22nd, 2016, and I am back from vacation. Does anybody remember how to work this thing? I've forgotten while I was away which buttons I'm supposed to press. I think everything's broadcasting nicely now. Oh, who knows? If not, Donald Trump said something outrageous and it's ridiculous and he's the most unqualified person ever. Hillary Clinton appears to be the most qualified person ever, and yet there's controversy and people are scratching their heads. And in case I never get back on the air again, I think that will cover us through November. And I don't know what else we can add to this. Did I miss anything while I was away? I did. They changed campaign teams, sort of, over at the Trump, I guess I was going to call it the Trump Organization, which it really is, even though that's actually a different entity from the Trump campaign. They don't treat it that way, so I don't know why I should. And, I don't know. Yeah, they brought in the Breitbart guy. I don't even know. Does it make any difference? Should I double back and cover this stuff? I think you probably all read all about it. We chatted, you and I, on Twitter just a little bit. I did keep track of what was going on. I think we just skip forward, perhaps, and catch what fallout there is. I think yet another team thinks that they can keep him under control, but this is really going to be interesting. It seems to me like there's a little bit of a fight going on between the top members of the new team. My instant read of this stuff 5 days later or whatever is by instant I mean unanalyzed read of what's going on. Steve Bannon, the new Breitbart, who, by the way, I have no expectation that he lives any longer in his job than Andrew Breitbart did, but whatever. That's a personal comment. Yes, write it down. We don't do that anymore. Neither does Donald Trump. This is the conflict that's going on. The Breitbart guy is obviously there to make Trump even more confrontational. Although I do think that there's a little twist to that. He's supposed to keep him alt-right and confrontational. And I don't think Donald Trump himself is, he's not alt-right himself, if I can even presume to define such a thing. But he's got plenty of fans there. He fills a need for them and carries water for them. And he wants to make sure that he continues to do that. But Bannon's job, as I'm seeing it, is to make it somewhat more palatable, a little slyer. For the most part, I mean, this is almost ridiculous to say that what Breitbart has been up to is trying to almost take the edge off of the ridiculousness of someone like Trump. They're as ridiculous, every bit as ridiculous as Trump. They're very bad at presenting themselves as mainstream to anybody with any measure of intelligence whatsoever. Luckily for them, I guess that's a rare thing among a certain segment of the voters, and they likely, well, I don't even know that they'll notice, but I think that they think that Bannon can turn up the alt-right heat and keep it closer to the vest, I guess, and harder to pin him down as just an overt nutso racist. I don't know that they're going to have any success with that, but I think that's what they're hoping for out of him. Kellyanne Conway, is that she's your run-of-the-mill, everyday, basic Republican operative, a little nuttier than most, a little more willing to go overboard. And, I mean, she's demonstrated it amply here by starting out the cycle working, I think, for Ted Cruz. And everybody has by now seen reference to, that would be me, seen reference to, video clips of her bashing Trump before she began working for Trump. And I think, though, she thinks that she'll keep Trump on the straight and narrow. She'll keep him sticking to teleprompter speeches and keep him off of Twitter and keep him off of saying things that require more fire control and damage control and take up resources that way. And so far, that has been a spectacular failure, I think, already today. The main theme of the Trump watchers' day is, she lost control of the Twitter account already. He's already out there screaming and ranting and raving, this time about Joe Scarborough, who I don't care. Good, I'd love to scream and rant about Joe Scarborough, too. I think they both suck, and it's like watching NFC East in-conference football games not involving the Giants. Who cares who wins? Just hope lots of people get put on injured reserve at the end, which is terrible, and it makes me a lousy human being. But, I feel better about it when it's Donald Trump and Joe Scarborough somehow. This I don't worry about as much. So I root for injuries in that game. And we'll see how this pans out. In the meantime, lots of discussion about a 12-year-old Trump staffer, quote-unquote staffer, I guess, running a campaign office in Colorado. That sounds totally legal. And it is funny. Yeah, it's being offered as a feel-good story when it is, in fact, what the hell's wrong with you story. But I guess enterprising young man has decided to take things on. But I view it, of course, as yet another Trump staffer who won't be able to vote for Trump in the end and just add it to the pile. All right, so what else have we to catch up on? Well, lots of other stories that I think are slightly more outside of the hair on fire incident of the moment that we can cull from. Of course, Greg Dworkin has his regular morning roundup of headlines, and we'll dive into that as well and try to get things back on track, generally. Canada was nice. Thank you, Canada. Thank you, Canadian listeners, for Canada-ing so that I could go there, however you define that. Very nice. I was only barely in Canada, about only as technical as it could get. Of course, Niagara Falls, but very nice, great place for the kids. We enjoyed it. Lots of water. I don't know if you guys know what goes on up there, but falls from one level to another in spectacular fashion, and everything costs more money. That's, I think, part of the hydroelectric thing. It just pumps up the prices. But then it gets converted to American dollars, and it looks a little bit less troubling afterwards. So we'll see. When the bills come, I'll let you know. Anyway, let's catch up on today's headlines, not having to do with the exchange rate, with Greg Dworkin. Hi, Greg. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. So did you get wet?
I did. Several different ways and several different angles. I did all the things. And
see it at night?
Went all the places. Saw it at night. Let's see. I was on the boat twice, so that's good. But we did the Canadian side boat. They have a made of the mist done Canadian style, which is to say, at least from the other bank. And that was pretty. They call that the horn blower.
Uh-huh.
So that was nice. And you do the same thing. You go under, you get wet. So we stayed on the Canadian side, so it was easier to do. But we didn't. So we didn't do Made of the Mist per se, but we did do Cave of the Winds, which is pretty wet too.
It's a pretty spectacular place if people haven't been. But I want to get back to what you started the show with. I think there are some important things to look at in terms of Kellyanne Conway and with Steve Bannon from the Breitbart Group that I think are very much worth going over. And we have a couple of different ways to do that. A lot of the material this morning will be right there in the abbreviated pundit roundup, which is entitled "A Safe Space for Bigots and Racists."
Oh, good. I need one of those. Which
is pretty much what Bannon brings to the team. So let's start with Kellyanne Conway. I haven't looked recently, but I was amused last week. I'm not advocating this. It was just amusing that when I looked up Kellyanne Conway on Wikipedia, the entry started with Kellyanne Conway is a professional GOP pollster and a professional dingbat. And so somebody has to get there and fix that.
Yeah, that's
you mentioned that she was a pollster for Ted Cruz. She was actually also a pollster for Todd Aiken.
Oh, that guy.
So she has some experience dealing with people whose foot needs to surgically be removed from their mouth.
Well, I guess. I mean,
what she specializes in is softening the language to make it more acceptable to women, Frank Luntz style.
Yeah. Well, it didn't work for Aiken, but okay.
Well, it didn't work for Aiken. It won't work for Trump. But ultimately, her job at the moment appears to be, given the title of campaign manager, which is odd, because what she really is a professional surrogate to say things nicer on TV about what Trump really meant. So you'll see a lot of her. You'll see very little of Bannon on TV, but you'll see a lot of Conway.
I can believe
because
that.
she's a reasonably well-spoken surrogate, and he doesn't have any.
Yes, she's blonde too, which they like.
She talks a lot, so she's perfectly capable of talking over people. She's very good at that.
She actually is quite skilled at that sort of work, which makes me wonder when they're going to fight she and Katrina Pearson. When do they get rid of her?
There's that, and also Bannon, and we'll get to that in a minute. The other side of the coin, and our friend Dana, who actually has managed campaigns, points out that the more time you spend on TV, the less time you actually are doing your work. You don't see Robbie Mook a lot.
Right, that's true. I mean, yeah, I guess she probably won't really be managing per se. Then you're right. She'll just be more.
She's been given the title of campaign manager, but it's not what she's doing because he doesn't have a campaign. She is the Trump whisperer, and her job is. And again, you point out she failed this morning. She didn't get up early enough, but her job is to follow him around and stop him from doing what he wants to do. Talk him out of it. Talk to him in a way that he will at least listen. The word is, based on the reporting that people have done, for example, is that his official pollster, who was part of the Paul Manafort campaign. Remember, while you were gone, Manafort was fired.
Yes.
Because he turned out to be a Russian mole.
Yeah. Or that is to say, we found the proof that he was.
Yeah. So he's out, and he's probably at legal risk. Because apparently he was a foreign agent who forgot to register.
He did forget. It's awful the way you have to remember things in this country.
So that's not completely going away. But one of the people that Manafort brought into the campaign was Tony Fabrizio, a professional pollster. So that was Trump's pollster.
Huh.
And the word is Kellyanne Conway, who was also a pollster, didn't like the way Fabrizio was presenting information to Trump because it made it look like Trump was losing. And Trump didn't like hearing that he's losing, so he never listened.
I see.
What Conway does is, you're too negative. You have to present this information in a way, Donald, you're only down by 15 points in New Hampshire.
You're number one in coming in second.
Right, exactly.
That's okay.
So it's the same information, but that's her job.
Okay. Not
really running the campaign, but presenting information to him in a way that he can digest, assuming that the reason that there's a sixth grader running his campaign office somewhere, as you pointed out, is because actually he himself is basically dealing with this at a 12-year-old level. So you got to talk to him like he's 12.
I guess
and so she can do that really well, and that's her job. But she does like to soften things so that it looks a little bit more acceptable to suburban Republican women. And you can see her hand in the discussion that he had in his recent campaign stops, quote, making an appeal to African Americans, which of course was nothing of the sort. Yeah. What it was an appeal to Republican white suburban voters who would like to think of themselves as a little bit less racist, and thereby supporting Trump being a little bit less racist. And so that's the purpose of all that. The outreach was not to African Americans. The outreach was to whites.
Yeah.
That's her handiwork.
That's how I understand her. That's how I understand her job description, basically. I keep coming back to the blonde woman thing. I mean, this isn't about what she looks like for any of us, but this is the sort of thing that for Donald Trump, I think he can take bad news if it's spun right, but it's delivered to someone he's very chauvinistic this way. Oh, well, at least she's easy on the eyes. Ho! And, that's kind of the way he operates. And when it comes to outreach, the fact that he needs to reach out to African Americans, he's not going to hire one. Oh, my God, no. He's just going to hire somebody to talk to.
That was Diamondale, Michigan, which is a small town that is 94% white, has less than 1% blacks. And that's where he would give that kind of speech. Yes. On the other hand, Steve Bannon, more active in Charlotte, North Carolina, given the setting. This is August 18th. And this is from a reporter named Jared Yates Sexton. I feature him today in the pundit roundup, but listen to some of these tweets and then put the picture together here. Okay, so he says, I got to tonight's Trump rally, was just next to a couple of guys by the press pit talking about beating the crap out of reporters. Heads up, the signal in here couldn't be worse, so he's trying to tweet. So there's a couple of grandmothers out here talking about their grandkids and executing Clinton in the same breath. And now they're talking about Clinton's brain damage. She's basically a vegetable, but a criminal vegetable. A glimpse at where Breitbart writers' words will go now.
Yeah.
Watched a woman get interviewed. As a reporter walked away, she yelled, "You're crooked, crooked, crooked as Hillary." A guy just asked why I'm here, followed me one side of the crowd to the other, keeps cheating up with his arms crossed. Some neo-Nazis in here, not a surprise. Cloud will not clap for speaker asking for recognition for Gerald Ford, turning Black History Week into Black History Month. That's a Kellyanne Conway line. But the crowd is super excited about the bathroom issue. It's North Carolina.
Okay. So,
Right, so you can separate out who's doing who. There's a disabled woman having a hard time, and everyone around me is rolling their eyes. One said, I wish she'd leave. African-American speaker says, not to enable minorities. Crowd goes crazy. Women next to me screams, F her, every mention of Hillary Clinton. Pastor insinuates, this is the pastor that he always has African-American pastor setting off his rallies. Pastor insinuates Clinton reminds him of the Wicked Witch. Person yells, she is a effing witch. The African-American pastor leads crowd in chanting, all lives matter. There's a definitive difference in how the crowd is talking about the press, mentions of violence and jailing. Again, that's the Breitbart thing. Guy said he thought Trump would lock up this honest press after the election. You got to do something. Still, as much violent rhetoric against Clinton, the talk about the press has escalated. People are pissed, and blame the polls on them. Okay, and then comes Giuliani. Giuliani says a good job is necessary. Time for freeloaders to get with the effing program. Everybody around me is calling Clinton a lying bitch. They've got Trump on a short leash, all teleprompter, no ad-lib. This is the important part. This is the Bannon influence.
Right.
Okay? This is a completely different Trump presentation-wise. They've injected self-deprecation into the speech, humanizes his political incorrectness.
Yes.
This is a frightening prospect. I can't tell you how different this is. Bannon has changed everything. This isn't the rambling, embarrassing Trump address. This is focused and has a message for media to swallow. Trump's speeches always eludes the crowds 20 minutes in after he starts boasting. This has them focused and listening. Trump says he's giving back, subtle answer to con sacrifices, nimble move the campaign was incapable of before. Remember, nimble navigator is code word for alt-right people on their keyboards moving around the normies like us.
Yes.
Guy behind me calling for Clinton to be thrown in prison, and you know what happens in prison. Somebody's yelling Obama's a goddamn Muslim terrorist. Trump is telling a story with this speech, which is very different. The guy next to me says that Trump, if he doesn't win, he thinks we'll either have a civil war or the country will die. Trump transitions to the media. There's a guy leaning on a guardrail staring at media as Trump criticizes him, mouthing, that's you. Another rail pointing at media members. Women wearing Trump versus Tramp button just said about the press, lock him up with Hillary, throw away the key. Trump's Muslim ban is growing. Now it's anybody who doesn't share their values, and this is literally all Breitbart material, no difference.
Yeah.
Trump says Clinton is the next Angela Merkel. Guy says a couple of bitches. Guy on guardrail acting like he's going to throw food at the press, and his buddies laughing. And the reporter, Jared Sexton, says, I know Breitbart would write all of Trump's speeches going forward, but this is unbelievable. Everybody says this is about letting Trump be Trump, but this is everything he wasn't. This is a puppet dancing for a new puppet master. Trump calls Clinton a bigot. Guy next to me says it's true. Trump talking about African Americans. Woman walking by shaking her head. What is he talking about? Trump is trying to refute the bigot label by maintaining bigoted policies, trying to appeal to racists who think they're not racist. And that's where you get the Kellyanne Conway and Breitbart blending there. If you thought Trump couldn't be more terrifying, welcome to the age of Breitbart. He says, speech ends, husband says to wife, let's go over and give us reporters a piece of our minds. He's looking for reporters to yell at.
Yeah.
So basically, Another says media is full of perverts and retards. Guy on escalator says libtards are libtards because they're afraid of a hard day's work. There's a lot more anger directed at the media. Woman just said everybody at CNN should be arrested. Somebody said Trump might lose because of biased media. A friend said if he loses, they might need to take matters into their own hands. This is what's coming out of his rallies.
Yeah.
Just watched a neo-Nazi buy a Trump bobblehead.
Well, that's cute. That's humanizing.
Right. Talked to multiple journalists, he says. All of them agreed it's getting worse. One said he wished he was undercover like me. Trump supporters in the parking garage. One says, I hope we can win. I hope there's no violence. Another says, well, just might. Oh. So he says, listen, this is a different Trump product. A dangerous one. Supporters are ready for violence. This one had a much different air. The crowd was vocal about readiness to pin Trump loss on the media. Several mentions of post-loss violence. I heard several people talking about wanting to hurt the press. There are people talking about attacking reporters, jailing them, lobotomizing them. They have a focus. They have a shared language. Trump has ceded his antipathy toward the press since the primaries. It's coming into full bloom. It's not dislike now. It's hatred. And tonight was frightening, period. Bannon has Trump polished up. His supporters are ready for violence and focused on media. I've covered the Trump campaign for over a year now and have seen this worsen. It's going to boil over. So that's what, there's a handful more. First death threat. Been a while since I got called a cook. It's like being home again.
Oh, yes, right, okay.
Somebody writes, tweets him, you'll be gassed first.
Oh, that's nice.
Always good to hear from a fan. But to give you an idea of what they're dealing with. So he's got this whole perspective here that what Bannon is doing is giving tighter, polished speeches that are shorter instead of rambling. And the point is that CNN certainly, and perhaps some of the other media outlets, will cover it in its entirety because it's shorter and made for cable. And that's what Bannon is bringing to the picture here. So Kellyanne is actually trying to soften it. Breitbart is not trying to soften it. He's trying to tighten it. And he's trying to make it so that it's palatable to media outlets. That's what he does.
Yeah, all right.
So the whole entire thing is a media campaign. It's not a campaign. It's season 3 of Donald Trump, the reality show, and that's what each one of these new hires brings. Fabrizio, the pollster with bad news, is probably going to be fired. A lot of the other people that were around Manafort are probably out. In the meantime, the picture of scary as it is described, the picture that this is actually working, the information on that is lacking. While all of this is going on, new swing state polls come out, which are just an utter disaster for Trump. For example, the CBS YouGov poll from yesterday showing that Trump is up 6 in Ohio. Need I remind you, you can't win without Ohio. This is a AP, how the Associated Press rates the presidential race in the road to 270. Clinton heads in the fall out front in enough states to give her at least a tie in the Electoral College, meaning a victory in any of the several states. Now a toss-up would be enough to push her over the top and into the White House. They consider toss-up states like New Hampshire, where she's leading by 7, average on pollster. Nevada, where she's leading by 2. North Carolina, where she's leading by a little bit more. Ohio, I just mentioned Ohio. Iowa and Florida. She just has to win one of those states to win the presidency. And she may well win them all. And they point out that that may be a conservative estimate of Clinton's head start over the Republican nominee. Now, there's only 78 days left. And, a lot of that is going to be wasted time because Trump still can't focus even if Bannon can focus his speeches, Trump can't focus his attention, so he spent the morning talking about Morning Joe instead of anything else. Yeah. And that's going to happen over and over and over between now until the election because Trump is Trump and you can't make him any different.
Yeah, I mean, unless they're there when he wakes up and take his phone, I don't know how they stop him from doing this. I guess I see what you're talking about, though. I mean, it's probably the best summary of the way it's going as between Bannon and Conway and what they're doing there. It's because the first couple of days I heard all about how he was going to professionalize or polish up the Trump act, and I didn't really see how a Breitbart type was really capable of doing that. But yeah, what they mean by tightening it up is now there's no more. He doesn't ramble into stories about the club or about golf or something about his own kids. He just
they hired Goebbels, and he's going to come in and he's going to give better speeches.
Yeah, instead of 40 minutes of racism and 20 minutes of personal anecdotes, it's 60 minutes of, well, I guess less, 45 minutes of solid racism.
Yeah,
that's good. That's efficient. I like that.
It's tightened, and then Kellyanne comes in and makes sure that at least some of the more overt language is brushed up a little bit. Now, there's other people in the Republican world who know them, who think that it is inevitable that they will clash, because her desire to smooth things out and try to win over Republican suburban women is in direct contradistinction to his approach of trying to make sure that the alt-right's on board.
Yeah. Oh, she's female. That she's automatically out. She can't be an alt-right figure unless you either somehow just ditch your femaleness or agree to ignore the men's rights side of the alt-right. Yeah, they don't like women a whole lot.
Right. So I gave you the whole big picture of what the rally looked like in North Carolina. And following this, Jared Yates Sexton, the author who was the reporter who was tweeting all of that stuff, yesterday had an op-ed in the New York Times, which is entitled, "Is the Trump Campaign Just a Giant Safe Space for the Right?"
Yes.
I could not help but think that the safe space during a recent assignment to cover a Trump rally at the Coliseum complex in Greensboro, North Carolina, we're just talking about this. Inside the auditorium, men gleefully referred to Hillary Clinton with misogynistic slurs. We were a little bit more blunt about what they were saying. Those same smears are printed on T-shirts sold by vendors outside. The men and women supporting them were constantly being pulled into photographs with their fellow Trump supporters, all of them slinging their arms around one another and flashing smiles and thumbs up. Emboldened by the atmosphere of serial transgression, a man a few feet away from me answered a warm-up speaker's call for solidarity with the victims of the massacre in Orlando by shouting, "The gays had it coming." So, again, his point here, he says, and it dawned on me, for them, the arena and then the parking lot had become their own safe space, where these people who had long been reined in by changing societal expectations, and especially the heavy burden of political correctness, felt they were finally free of the ridiculous expectations of overly sensitive liberals.
Yeah.
At the same time, there was an overt hostility to dissent and difference. At one point, a man standing nearby looked me over and said, "You don't look right." I had no doubt that had I suggested Mrs. Clinton was not, in fact, a lesbian communist, I'd have been forcibly removed, or worse.
Yes.
And I saw cars of supporters hurling slurs at a passing motorist waving a Mexican flag out his driver's side window. For a good stretch of my 5-hour drive home, I chewed over the great mystery that is the Trump phenomenon. The media has questioned incessantly why people flock to his campaign. He's not particularly magnetic. He's not even that compelling. His speeches are loud but dull and tiring. That great swaths of his crowds head for the door early. Perhaps the appeal lies elsewhere. Maybe all this electoral chaos has been sown as an excuse to gather in public under the guise of civil engagement to say the vile, hateful things that the majority of the country has long shunned. It's not about Mr. Trump. He's the cover, the cheerleader, not the quarterback. In a perverse way, many Trump supporters want what they criticize, the sense of winning that seems to be the sole preserve of the cultural elite, the ability to set the terms of discussion, the freedom to speak their minds and not face criticism. Whether it's same-sex marriage, the last two presidential elections, or the Confederate battle flag, several of which I saw at the rally, they have not won in such a long time. Commentators have tried to cast Mr. Trump as a master manipulator, using his supporters to carry him to the White House. That may be his intention, but the reality is the other way around. His supporters are using him. Indeed, as I got in my car to drive home, I realized that since leaving the Coliseum, of all the things I had heard people say, there was one phrase I hadn't heard his supporters utter once. Donald Trump's name. Interesting. So they're talking about the environment, what they want from him, but not him.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty. It's a pretty good manifestation of a slightly different strain of gimmitarianism. But they're there for themselves, and there's some kind of unifying event going on. Well, aren't you going to swear fealty to the candidate? Maybe. I mean, if he wins, great.
The important thing is to attack all those other people who are, against our own personal way of life, which we can exhibit by gathering in these large rallies because, like, everybody else hates it.
And it also explains a lot of why, well, how come you can't sway them with, I hate the financial elite in this country. Well, who do you think you're talking about? Screw that. He doesn't matter. Well, you're
right.
for this, he's against that.
Right,
who cares?
right. And that's, by the way, why it doesn't matter what he says.
Yeah.
That's why he's never held to, he had this position yesterday and that position today. None of that truly matters. The only thing that matters is he's legitimized, and it's going to get worse with Bannon and the Breitbart team. He's legitimized being the way they are.
Yeah. All of the things that armed society was supposed to bring us are not coming. We are instead encouraged to be the opposite plus have the arms. This is not a good combination.
Right.
Well...
So this is Dave Weigel in the Washington Post. Also have this in the Pundit Roundup. When Trump made Breitbart News CEO Steve Bannon his campaign's chief executive, Taylor, a white nationalist, found reasons to celebrate. It was the latest sign for white nationalists, or what Weigel, for some bizarre reason, calls racialists.
Oh, yes, I think they've come up with a term that hints at racism but isn't racist.
Right. Once dismissed as fringe, that their worldview was gaining popularity and that the old Republican Party was coming to an end. Trump's newest speeches, read from a teleprompter, hit all their favorite notes. I don't think Trump had mentioned sanctuary cities previously. Spencer, another guy, said in an interview, there's reason to believe that Bannon is returning him to his powerful populist message, honing it. Former campaign chairman Manafort was turning Trump into a standard Republican with the Mike Pence vice presidential choice, the economic policy, talk of how Hillary's the real racist, if not quite in those words. But Bannon is making me hope again, making Trump Trump again.
Okay.
And that's coupled with a piece from Mediaite. David Duke show celebrates Trump's Breitbart hire. We've taken over the Republican Party.
Yeah. Well, I think they have. But it was easy.
Right. So that's what I'll leave you with today. That's basically, jumping back into it a little bit. Won't be here tomorrow. Won't be here a week from Wednesday, but I'll be here for the rest of the week with you and next week as well. Lots to read over at the Pundit Roundup today. And thanks so much to the Netroots Radio folks for making this all happen. We missed you while you were away, but we're back. And if you're listening on We Act Radio, or if you're listening by podcast or download, however you do it, we're very grateful that you do. David's back. He'll talk live. We'll do it live for the next hour and a half, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Greg. Good to hear from you again.
Take care.
Take care. We'll see you Wednesday. Okay, so we got to finish the show and then do tomorrow. And then we'll get a chance to let Greg carry the show again on Wednesday. Oh, and Wednesday will be a twofer, of course, because then when he gets done, I'll have Joan carry the show, and it'll be great. It's almost like a day off, but a day off for which you have to get up in the morning anyway. So it's a give and take sort of situation. All right. Here's something for you to think about, those of you who can reason through such things. I just noticed out of the corner of my eye, Robert Costa tweeting that Trump is headed to Bedminster on Saturday night following a Virginia rally with his... headed to Bedminster on Saturday night following Virginia rally. Does that mean he's not having a rally until next Saturday, or am I reading this wrong? Following a Virginia rally, he met with his advisors Sunday at his club. And he was in, Fredericksburg, I think, on, I guess, yesterday for the rally. Although I wonder if he's getting the names or the days wrong. I'm not even sure. But he's referring, Costa, to a tweet from Brad Jaffe that says, Trump's campaign manager tells Hallie Jackson that debate was discussed in strategy meetings, but classic debate prep doesn't apply to him. So that should be interesting when debate season comes around. And I'm not even sure what the dates for those things are, even though they've been settled since forever. Only that Trump thinks they conflict with football games, and therefore it's a bad thing. But I'm sure we'll update with Greg one of these days about when the debates are. But what an interesting thing. It struck me that, again, just that side note that he had met with his advisors on Sunday at his club. And in Virginia, that means the Trump National Golf Club, Lowe's Island Golf Club. To those of us who have lived in the area for longer than 10 seconds, when they rename things, it doesn't always take with the old timers around here. But it made me wonder. It's not close, Fredericksburg. It's not terribly far away, especially if you have access to, I guess, Secret Service escorted cars and helicopters and campaign planes, etc. But, and I'm not sure what Bedminster it is that he's heading to. There's more than one, and he does tend to do his rallies in weird places. But, I mean, there's Bedminster, New Jersey. There's a Bedminster, Pennsylvania. There's, how many other Bedminsters can I think of? I'm not certain which one he's heading to. I see. Here we go. And there's a Bedminster where there's a golf course. Where is that? Trump National Golf Club Bedminster is where? Oh, look at that. It's home of the 2017 U.S. Women's Open. They should move that. And the 2022 PGA Championship, where there's still time to move that too. Bedminster, New Jersey. So it is Bedminster, New Jersey, after all. Ridiculous place to put the Trump National Golf Course. And I can't believe that he would have developed that. Did he buy Fiddler's Elbow? Is that that was the course? Although that was, I thought, ironically enough, in Clinton, New Jersey. But hey, let's see. Now I'm curious about. I don't think he built that thing from scratch. He didn't build Lowe's Island from scratch, that's for sure. So, I don't know. I wonder if Wikipedia will tell me what did the thing used to be. I'm sure it's not something he developed, although it certainly turned the clubhouse into a Trump-looking thing. Anyway, so I guess I thought that meant that he went from Fredericksburg, Virginia, up to the Trump National Golf Course in Sterling, Virginia, and had his meeting there, as he did when he had his rally in Ashburn, Virginia, and much closer to Trump National in Virginia, and then had his meetings there. But I'm wondering why he keeps stopping in and peeking in on properties or having meetings at his clubs. I mean, I'm sure that feeds his ego. You have all your meetings in your Trump buildings, and that's just part of his standard power play and staying on home turf, as it were. But I was just kind of curious. I mean, it's a minor issue, but I was wondering, does anybody think is there some financial angle to this? Is he stopping in and having meetings at properties so that he can deduct something on taxes or some kind of expenses, or double dip on the campaign stuff and get the campaign to pay for things but also deduct part of his day on his taxes, or what? I don't know exactly what would be going on there, but it seems to me like there's very, very little reason for him to be, one, holding the rallies where he's having them, and two, stopping in at all the golf courses and the clubs and whatnot. So I'm just curious if any, I guess maybe an accountant would have some answer for that. And now I wanted to just see if I could Google up this Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster. Is it possible that it was built? But it doesn't. I don't know if it tells me what the history is. There we are. Part of stalled development in New Jersey. Trump buys golf course. So that's again, it's another one of those things that he nowhere along the line does he ever say, "I'm going to shop for a piece of land, scout it out that I think would make a good golf course, buy it, hire developers, build the golf course, and say I built this thing from scratch." He builds, or he buys golf courses that have been built already or are in the process of being built and are financially distressed, and then he buys them and finishes them up. I guess that's what he's usually doing. I wonder if any of these things will tell me which one. The Wikipedia article doesn't identify it very easily. So I'm sort of scanning down here. Let's see. Memberships. It says, by the way, members include former President Bill Clinton, Rudy Giuliani, and Joe Torre. Isn't that nice? So that makes for a good foursome there. In 2005, Golf Magazine ranked it number 73 in the United States. So I should take a look at that because that's probably before he bought it, and that'll tell me what the real name of the golf course actually is. Let's see. Part of stalled development in New Jersey, Trump buys golf course. That's from the New York Times. Now, I'm curious. You'll have to explore along with me here. Let's see. His name is already on glittery casinos in Atlantic City, and Donald Trump will soon add it to something else in New Jersey. This, by the way, is a 2002 article, so maybe... how did I not notice that he had a Trump National Golf Course for 14 years in New Jersey? All right, so soon he'll add something else, a stalled 18-hole golf course and housing development in the affluent Somerset County township of Bedminster. On October 1st, he is closed to the purchase of the incomplete project spread over 520 acres, 435 of them the former estate and farmland of the failed automaker John Z. DeLorean. That's how he got into that property. That's his thing. He buys distressed properties, which, you've probably seen on late night television as a way to get rich quick, right? So flipping the property instead of buying foreclosed homes and fixing them up as homes and then flipping them and selling them, he buys distressed homes and converts them into something else and then puts the Trump name on them and flips them that way. The winery that he referred to in the latest Virginia rally, the one in Fredericksburg, I listened to a little bit of, and he made sure of saying he had a section on agriculture. We got a lot of farmers here in Virginia. Yeah, I mean, we do. It's an agricultural state. Well, and then he insinuated, well, I'm a farmer too. I got one of the biggest wineries in the world, which we could talk about. One of the biggest wineries in the world you would think would be responsible for producing a volume of wine that you could not avoid at a wine shop, but you can in fact avoid Trump wines at most wine shops. They produce they don't produce much in the way of volume, and that's the way normally there's an industry piece out there that I actually have saved somewhere. He keeps boasting on having one of the largest wineries. Wineries, when you say you're the largest one, you're talking about the volume of wine produced. He's saying, well, there's lots of acreage, not all of which is under cultivation, and hardly any of which is actually producing wine, but there's extra space around it. So there's that. And that's what he's using to claim that it's one of the largest wineries. And also he's a farmer just like you there in Fredericksburg, where there's really not much farming going on. But he bought the estate off of somebody else who was trying to develop a winery there and was in financial distress and needed to sell it off piece by piece, and so he bought it. So here, this golf course is the former estate of John DeLorean, who got himself in financial trouble, so Trump arranges to buy his property, I guess. Mr. Trump said the price was substantially less than the $35 million the seller invested in the project. He said he would open the 280-acre course designed by Tom Fazio in the summer of 2004. A membership in what is to be called the Trump National Club at Bedminster. The name echoes that of another Trump property at Briarcliff Manor in Westchester County. Is to cost $300,000, he said, same as in Westchester. The 1939 mansion at the Bedminster development will be turned into a clubhouse. DeLorean bought the estate in 1981, just as he began manufacturing his sports cars with their wing-like doors. It was sold at a bankruptcy auction in January 2000 to the current seller, a group of investors whose largest equity holder is Fairways International of Southport, Connecticut. This year, the group, facing financial difficulties, halted work at the site. Trump said he planned to sell the 14 lots along the course to buyers building estate homes. So it never opened, I guess, under its own name. How remarkable, really, in a time where it's all been self-promotion for Trump. It's a 14-year-old, 12 to 14-year-old course, and I've never even heard of it. I'm not the biggest golf aficionado in the world, but I do pay attention to some of these things. Anyway, So, but there you go. Another story of him not actually having a vision of any kind, but coming in, finding out about other people's visions on which they've failed, and buying it and putting his name on it and opening it. All right. So, I guess in his mind he brings projects to fruition, which I suppose is something to cling to. I mean, it's not that he's done nothing with his life. Just nothing valuable. And even bringing this project to fruition. Who cares? Another golf course. Big whoop. Do we really need this? I don't think so. All right. Well, let's see. What other fun things has Greg dropped for us here? Things that we didn't get to, and things that he added on at the end. Lots of speculation I have seen over the last couple of days, especially with the hire of Steve Bannon. The question of whether Trump's real end game, since he can't, well, I guess he could, but nobody else really believes he's going to win the election, although, blah, 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 don't get complacent, I know, and crazier things have happened, etc., but, okay. So, somebody's got to be thinking that maybe they don't win inside the organization. What is he after? And what does the Bannon hire mean, given the fact that Bannon has never managed a campaign of any kind, anywhere, at any level, ever? Why would you do this? And the speculation I have seen bandied about most frequently is the idea that he's setting up after his loss for some sort of media empire of his own, whether branded as a Trump property or not, but basically some sort of media empire that will propagate the sort of stories that he likes to make up and tell and pretend are real on the campaign trail. I think he would prefer it if there were other people saying this stuff besides him or in coordination with him. And right now that only happens by coincidence, I guess, or by hiring, of course, the people who publish these sorts of nonsense rags. So here's a piece that I guess we'll get to the heart of this if I can get it to open and stay open. Always a question mark towards the end of the month. Here we are, Washington Post. Because it's a Greg Sargent Plumline piece, it will stay open and not count against my 10-article limit, and really I ought to fix that one of these days and just buy the damn subscription. They're very helpful, the Washington Post. They really are. Trump's real end game, a white nationalist media empire? Question mark, some say. Let's take a look. Oh, and he's wearing a new color combination in his hat in the Reuters photo illustrating the piece. This time a white hat with blue Make America Great Again lettering, a new addition to the lineup. Has Donald Trump given up on winning the White House and, quote-unquote, pivoted, this might be his real pivot, Greg says, to a full-blown effort to build a national following that will outlast the election, perhaps allowing him to establish a media empire with him at the helm, one that caters, at least to some degree, to a white nationalist or alt-right audience? Was that his plan all along? That's a good question. It seems like good speculation. Lots of people are into it. I got one or two lingering questions about that. I still don't think that Donald Trump himself is or considers himself to be alt-right. He's just a cranky old guy to whom no one says no, and he spews garbage and he likes it, and when people cheer for it, that excites him and encourages him, and he does it some more. And to him, I think, I'm sure they've explained to him, well, you're appealing to this particular demographic, which is sort of describes itself as alt-right. That's what they call themselves. You might recognize some of the figures in it. They allow, what's her name? Ann Coulter to play around in the alt-right garden a little bit. Even though she's female, they generally just don't like women saying things. They like women. They consider themselves to be heterosexual, these men, and therefore this is literally the sort of person that will say things like, well, I love women. I put women on pedestals, like he does. They adore them as sex objects and very little more. And by adore, I mean they like to have sex with them, and then they just as soon punch them in the face when they're done, especially if they actually open their mouths and say anything. God forbid they try to weigh in on something that men should be taking care of, like politics. But Ann Coulter they're okay with, because I think, generally speaking, they don't want to have any sex with her. So it's okay for her to speak. Besides which, she's... for them, an eminence grise. She's been speaking on these subjects for a long time. They're not particularly sexually attracted to her, really, although they like to hold her up and say, well, isn't she better looking than any Democratic woman pundit? And sometimes there's a racist tinge to that, too. No, she's not. It's just that you're racist, and some of the, say, a young black woman that they might put on television to speak on behalf of Democrats is not attractive to you because you hate her because you're a racist. So, that's a problem. But anyway, I don't want to get necessarily into that angle, because that's a pretty subjective thing. And who the hell wants to be commenting on whether or not people who are there for their supposed to be there for their thinking are attractive or not? We're not supposed to worry about these things. But sometimes I feel like you have to psychoanalyze some of these guys, because there's no politics to analyze. There's no policy issues with them to analyze. There's no logic that they have to analyze. All you can analyze is the various ways in which they're disturbed individuals, and that's one of them. Anyway, I don't think that Donald Trump, he's just too old to be alt-right, and I don't think he cares enough about politics to care about what classification he would fit into. And alt-right is a young person's game. Cranky old people who turn more conservative, that's just almost a normal phenomenon. And cranky rich people who turn more conservative, well, that's what being rich will likely do to you, and it's a difficult thing to avoid if you're not a particularly bright person. So you fall into cranky gimmitarianism, and it just happens to fit well with alt-right. And the alt-right, of course, being on the outside of almost everything, is just happy to latch on to something that can give them cover to help turn them into the stalking horses they've always wished they were, and pretend they're more mainstream and that they're winning more acceptance when they're really not. Even most of the people at the rallies, probably, honestly, if it came down to it, where it was necessary for them to answer the question of, are you going to allow yourself to be categorized as alt-right, they I think, view true alt-right activists as distasteful punks. Probably. First of all, they're weirdo, elitist, vaping, East Coast neo-Nazi weirdos. And the disdain, I think, goes both ways. I think a lot of the alt-right figures, or people who imagine themselves to be alt-right figures, have a very palpable disdain for most of the people who are at Trump rallies. They think of them as flabby, fat, mostly pretty unintelligent normies who don't grasp the true significance of what they're seeing, other than that it makes them feel good. But what do they care? They're the the shock troops of the revolution, and that's fine. They don't hold any aspirations to be policymakers anyway, so that'll be left up to us, and we'll be the elite of the new order. But so far they haven't had to fight that particular civil war, and I don't even know that they'll have a great difficulty with it. Most of the people at the rallies will be just as happy to become what they consider to be apolitical again when it's all over. In the world that they imagine, in which Donald Trump wins, and then Donald Trump takes care of politics, and they can retire back to the concerns about whether or not Budweiser's on special. So anyhow, is my mobility scooter charged? I need to go to the beer store. That kind of stuff. I have disdain for them too. Trust me. I'm alt-left. How about that? maybe I need a new designation for myself there. I'm willing to cop to disdain for people at Trump rallies. I'm open enough in that respect. Anyway, so I guess this is just sort of free-form venting about the oddity of having hired Steve Bannon. But in order to make a narrative out of it, they're thinking, well, he's a media figure, and Trump himself exists largely thanks to the media, and he certainly loves nothing more than exploiting the media's interest in his circus. So might he not be interested in building a media empire after the election? And again, I don't know. I mean, I think that there are probably lots of alt-right figures who are hopeful that that's what that he'll do, and that I guess what they're really hoping for is they'll get a platform to continue spewing their crap, and they'll get paid for it, which I have some bad news for you guys. He doesn't actually establish businesses and pay people long term at most of these things. There is, of course, the Trump Organization is probably the most stable thing that he's got, and the thing most capable of paying you long term. But the landscape is literally littered with, and I think I'm right in saying literally, unlike Katrina Pearson, who loves to use literally, like Joe Biden, who uses it incorrectly, but I don't know, he seems to do it in a good-natured way, whereas she seems to be doing it for ridiculous reasons. Maybe I'm being unfair there, but the landscape literally is littered with Trump projects where people, I'm sure, thought that they were on a long-term gravy train and were abandoned pretty quickly. And one of them is a media empire. We might as well add that to the mix. But maybe we can do so by finishing up with the morning plum here and see what there is in terms of supporting evidence for the media empire idea. Was that the plan all along, I guess, is the ending question of the first paragraph. I doubt it very much, although it may have been the alt-right's plan all along. I don't think that it was his. But I got nothing to go on. The last few days, Greg Sargent writes, have brought fresh reporting and evidence that suggest this is where Trump is really headed, a scenario that a number of observers, your humble blogger included, have been speculating about for months. I thought it would be useful to round up this evidence. Okay, let's see. 1, and they're not numbered, they're just bullet points. Vanity Fair media writer Sarah Ellison reports in a radio interview that Trump has had private discussions with his inner circle about how to monetize the new audience he's built up. Now, no doubts in my mind about that. As Ellison puts it, this potential goal should no longer be seen as speculation. No, he's put in an awful lot of work. In his mind, he's put in time and effort and money, and that really may only be in his mind that he's put in money. I'm not sure, but he's put somebody's money into it, and he's definitely the kind of guy who is looking for a return on that investment. The principles of economics, of course, teaches that we're all the kind of people looking for a return on investment, and maybe he's even more hyper aware of it than the rest of us. But yes, he believes this thing has been a huge expense and expenditure of energy. For all his talk, he's a pretty low energy guy himself, and this is pretty grueling for him, and he wants to see that it pays off, as he wants to see everything pay off. But now, as he's got an audience he never had before, and he's wondering, how can I get money out of them? Media is one way, and it may just be that there isn't any other viable option for continuing to draw money out of people besides the media option. I don't know how else you monetize the political lists he's put together. I mean, you could campaign perpetually. Yes, there's always that. But in off years, there needs to be something else. And I think that's probably a good reason to think he might be interested in a media empire. But whether it was the aim from the beginning, I still have doubts. And that doesn't really speak to that, in my opinion. The New York Times, this being bullet point number 2, reports today that in July, Trump's campaign spent more on renting arenas for his speeches than he did on setting up national field operations, leaving him with no operation to speak of. That is consistent with the idea that Trump, as I've speculated, Greg says, is very consciously sinking most of his resources into a format, that is rallies, that allows him to continue staging his unique form of raucous WWE-style political entertainment and building an audience that thrills to it than he is to winning a general election. And again, I will agree with that evidence as evidence of his interest in how to campaign, though I'm not certain it argues in favor of a media empire afterwards. But I have a feeling that this is building towards getting tied up in the next couple of bullet points. Sarah Posner, in point number 3 here, of Mother Jones, has some excellent reporting this morning on new Trump campaign chief Stephen Bannon, which shows Bannon has skill and experience in creating a media outlet, Breitbart, explicitly aimed at the ethno-nationalist audience. As Bannon himself put it last spring, we're the platform for the alt-right. Bannon naturally denies that his nationalism is racially driven, but Posner shows that Bannon has regularly stoked racial themes, and one former Breitbart insider has explicitly said that Bannon's Breitbart has become a gathering place for white nationalists. That's true too, but it doesn't tell me anything about media as being a particularly lucrative cash cow for Trump. In fact, it doesn't even tell me very much about it being a lucrative cash cow for Bannon or the Breitbart folks. It's running, but it's impossible to tell anymore the way modern finances go and modern corporate financing and modern corporate governance goes. The fact that something is a going concern for several years in a row no longer means that it's a profitable concern. I don't know whether Breitbart makes money. I think Steve Bannon has extracted an awful lot from the, what passes for the Breitbart empire, but I don't know that it's profitable. That's not the same thing either, and we've heard that story over and over again. Things that don't have to be profitable. In fact, it's best that they not be. If they're to be personally profitable for the people driving the company, the idea that the company would profit, well, why should the company profit? I need to extract as much of that as I can. The only reason to allow a company to profit is to be able to show that profit to potential investors and get more people to sink money into it that you can extract later. There's got to be a balance that you strike. If you can't make a profit, then you got to come up with an excuse. And if you're not a .com, then the excuses are thin. But financialization of most businesses is making it easier and easier to .com-ize almost anything. Just say, yeah, I know I'm not profitable. Well, maybe you've heard of a little outfit called Amazon, and they haven't turned a profit. And that, believe it or not, for sophisticated investors, supposedly sophisticated investors, that's often enough to make people say, oh, yeah, you're right. Amazon hasn't made any money, and yet look at the stock price. I'll make billions. Anyway, let's see. So we'll move on here. Either Trump actually sees Bannon as just the guy to expand his appeal, that is, he actually thinks that doubling down on the same approach and themes that won the GOP primaries will somehow expand his appeal, or he has something else in mind. And given that all the conventional wisdom says, no, you're not going to be able to expand beyond the base you had in the primaries with this strange subgenre of republicanism, but that's conventional, and maybe it's not to be believed anymore. But if you do believe that he can't expand beyond that his approach has a very definite ceiling, and listening to the last week of reruns, you heard how well all of those predictions about ceilings came out. But if you for some reason continue to believe that he's got this ceiling, then I suppose it'll make you think he must have something else in mind here. Next bullet point, Trump's first TV ad of the general election, with its fear-mongering about refugee terrorists and dark hordes flooding over the southern border, did not appear to be aimed at the constituencies Trump needs to improve among college-educated whites, suburban women, non-whites, and Politico's Alex Eisenstadt reports that the Trump campaign's plan was initially to air an ad about the economy, which would make more sense as a way to reach those voter groups, but abruptly shifted at the last minute to the hardcore immigration spot, surprising even some of Trump's campaign insiders when they just switched teams. So it's to be expected. At critical moments, Trump continues to revert to form, which is to say he keeps speaking to that hard Trumpist core as if maintaining their interest is the paramount goal. Again, I mean, I guess that's closer to saying, well, if I just keep, I need to keep feeding them something, and when the campaign is over, media is the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that gives us the opportunity to continue feeding them. But like, they don't pay, do they pay to go to Trump rallies now? I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe if he's not selling tickets, he should be thinking about that. I don't know if I know anything about how he's given out the tickets to these things, but the idea that the average attendee at some of these rallies would sign up for and subscribe to a Breitbart Trump publication long term, I think I have my doubts about that. Although, you know, if you build the list big enough, then only, you know, the 10% rule, 10% response rate, and the 10%, you know, even opening the email invitation to subscribe, and then 10% of them subscribing. If the bigger the list, the bigger the take, even at the 10% of 10% rule, as it goes on. Have we ever described that thing to you? This, I think, was actually one of Marcos's thoughts about how these things tend to work. If you make a email pitch for subscriptions, that about 10% of anybody you pitch anything to will actually react positively to it. 10% of the people you email will actually open the thing. 10% of them will respond positively by clicking to the page where they can subscribe, but then only 10% of those who click to the page to subscribe will actually subscribe. And so I guess the bigger your list is, the more money you can haul in, and that's always been true. It's certainly not anything that was invented online or by Trump or anything like that, but he's very likely got the sense of that too, and looking to grow his list as big as it can be, also by emailing foreigners and foreign government officials as well, looking for donations. Not that any of them would be legal, but hey. And I guess if your universe is big enough, then there's a viable media property in it, at least for some short amount of time. I don't know that he can sustain interest over years without campaigning in this thing. But, you know, if the price point is right and it's just one of many businesses, if it's not his main business interest, it wouldn't sustain the Trump lifestyle, let's say, for there to be a Trump media empire based on appealing to the alt-right after his election. But it could pay the salaries of a couple of top people and for a while a couple of middling and low-level people as well, and possibly also be able to afford to pay Trump, you know, a couple $100,000 a year for lending his name to the empire. That's basically it. And I'm sure Bannon is probably, I'm sure it was appealing to him, the idea of being able to start something without having the Breitbart name hung on it. And I don't know whether he's interested in hanging the Bannon name on anything, but getting out from underneath the shadow of Andrew Breitbart is probably on his mind. And he may be interested in having a media empire that way. And Trump, you know, what, like anything. Am I interested in having a media empire? I don't know. Am I interested in having a condo in Baja, California? No. I mean, I'll take it. Sure. I'll take the fame for it. Sure. I'll put my name on it and take money in exchange for putting my name on it. But I don't really want to run a media empire any more than I want to, you know, be superintendent of a condo building in Mexico. I just want money from it. So I don't think this is any different. I think it would be, it's overstating the case, I think, to get that much further ahead of ourselves and say, yeah, he's aiming at a media empire. He's aiming at another business from which he can extract cash, and the people around him have expertise in media manipulation, and the internet makes it possible to start it up at low costs. And so, yeah, go to town, you guys, whatever. I think that's what's going on here. Let's see. There's still more here, and it's all good information, even if it doesn't point to any definite conclusion about a media empire. The next bullet point is, if this is Trump's endgame, he is already succeeding at building an audience. Dave Weigel reports that white nationalist and alt-right figures are finding a lot to like in Trump's new immigration ad and in his overall messaging. And there's nothing, they're going to continue to find a lot to like in whatever he does, both because they're gimitarians and also because they're not yet quite in control of things. And if by coincidence there's something they can get behind that Trump puts out, they're only too happy to champion it and say, this is because of our influence, and then pat themselves on the back for that. Although now that they have Bannon in there, I guess they have reason to believe that they'll see considerably more of it, and a lot of it will be because they do, in fact, drive a lot of what will, I'm sure, now pass as policy. But I'll continue here with this paragraph. In a very telling moment, one white nationalist writer asks us to, quote, imagine a media. Imagine a media. Sounds like one of these, it's a movie trailer. Imagine a world that was more Breitbart than the New York Times. Adding that what the media have been telling them, the them being whites, about race relations is simply wrong. Oh my. Trump has trafficked heavily in similar ideas, regularly accusing the media of covering up inconvenient, quote, truths, such as the notion that, quote, thousands and thousands, unquote, of American Muslims celebrated on 9/11. Trump understands very well that there is a big audience out there for people who want to believe that the American press, hamstrung by political correctness, wink wink, won't tell the truth about race and Islam. Now, admittedly, all of this is still speculative, and I, Greg Sargent, hesitate to ascribe grand and clever schemes to Trump, because the more prosaic reality could simply be that he is making all of this up as he goes along. And I think that's probably more it than anything else. But this possibility is worth taking seriously, if only because it could have untold longer-term consequences. Trump has already been saying the election will be rigged as part of a broader effort to delegitimize the presidency of Hillary Clinton, should she win, in advance. Not a tried and true method used against Barack Obama, of course. So reasonable to expect that it will work against Hillary as well. If the goal here is to persuade a lot of Trump supporters that the outcome of the election is illegitimate, that could create a large audience that wants to hear this message during a Clinton presidency. Yes. Okay. And this part I agree with wholeheartedly, that this lends itself very smartly, I think, to the idea of a media empire afterwards. And it doesn't have to be media. And a more inventive and more creative person would perhaps come up with some sort of next generation media, or something other than an old line media company that works on either on a subscription basis, or I guess these days you can financialize almost anything, and you can adopt the operating platform of some of the other crazy industries out there that that are evaluated well beyond what reasonable fundamentals would ordinarily, in the old days, would have said something is worth. So it's entirely possible that they can, for instance, and the internet facilitates a lot of this, do something that's not subscription but somehow claim to be raking in millions of dollars, and find themselves with access to millions of dollars even though they ought not to. Some of that operation is just beyond me, but everybody seems to be able to pull it off. Anyway, but yeah, this would be brilliant marketing for that. How can I grow the list, in other words, from which I will cull 10% of 10% in terms of subscriptions? And the answer is, this seems to be working. I will inflame fears that the outcome of the election will be illegitimate, and that continuing, don't look to CBS, NBC, or even Fox News or CNN to be the ones to tell you that the election is illegitimate. They're vested in the status quo, and they'll tell you something stupid and unbelievable like, well, we counted the ballots that were cast, and it turns out that many, 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 many more ballots were cast in favor of Hillary Clinton for president, and that's why she's president, because that's the way things work in this country. Oh, really? Isn't that exactly, how coincidental that that's exactly what you want us to believe? Well, if you can build the volume for that list, then 10% of 10% of those idiots will, in fact, spend $10, $15 a year for the new Trump Bart, whatever you want to call it, media empire subscriptions, and out of which $250,000 a year will go to Trump himself. And for him, that's worth it, because he's not that rich, and $250,000 is pretty good money to add on top of the other things you're scamming people out of. All told, you do enough $250,000 a year scams, it starts to look like you're a billionaire. Particularly if people will loan you money on no basis whatsoever. Okay, so let's see. So you want to sell the idea that the election is going to be rigged as a way of riling people up, and then when you lose the election and they say, who will tell me the truth about what happened here, if CNN, NBC, Fox, ABC, CBS, etc. are in the business of lying to me? Well, we will. We'll tell you the truth. And, about 6 people out of this whole group across the country will say, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. That's a total conflict of interest. How can I trust you to tell me the truth about what happened when you're the one, you're the guy who lost. Of course you're going to tell me the story about how you lost is not your fault. But the rest of them will say, yes, good. I can't wait to lap that up. $10, what? That's good meth money. I can't give you that. Well, that's going to be the big barrier for getting the dollars out of people. But reminder, we keep finding out every once in a while when they actually survey people that Trump's audience to this point, though we keep being told, well, they're not racist, they just have a lot of economic anxiety, they actually demographically are doing relatively well. They're not the poor white trash that we like to think that they are. They, in fact, have got some money. And even, to use the offensive term again, poor white trash, they find ways to spend money on the things that they want. Meth ain't cheap. Guns aren't cheap. $10 a year for more news. And then, of course, that, I don't know, that might even appeal to them. Well, I subscribe to a newspaper, for God's sake. I'm practically an Eastern elitist at this point. They might be able to find the $10 for it. It's hard to imagine now them spending $10 on something like that. 1, it's reading. 2, it's politics, and they don't really like that kind of stuff. And they don't particularly have any personal loyalty necessarily to Trump, but maybe if they can get, what they really need to do is give people the sense that subscribing to the newspaper gives them the opportunity to run around and say Hillary Clinton's a bitch and we should kill her. That's what they're looking for, the rally atmosphere delivered to their email inbox, except I don't know if they have email inboxes, but, and I guess it could be done. Or maybe, maybe the thing is that they'll like the most, will end up being not the articles per se and not the subscriptions per se, but the access that it gives them to online forums, which they already have and can have for free. And they know probably in the back of their minds, they could set these things up for themselves at home for free and maybe even charge other people to access it and thereby build their own media empires, but they're not up for that. And it takes forever to build an audience like that. Even though say Marcos actually built that for himself quite some time ago, and it worked out. But maybe the time for that is past, and they just want to ride on the Trump train. It's a get rich quick scheme for the people who can figure out how to get the money together to pay Trump to license his name to build a media empire on, I guess. All right. Well, anyway, it If the goal here, it says, is to persuade a lot of Trump supporters that the outcome of the election is illegitimate, that could create a large audience that wants to hear this message during a Clinton presidency, a message that Trump's new media venture could peddle to them for fun and profit. For good measure, Trump can also tell his new media audience that the rest of the media is in on the conspiracy to cover up the election's illegitimacy, and he will. It's hard to predict what sort of longer-term civic impact that might have, but it's hard to imagine it would be a good one. It's also hard to imagine that Trump cares one way or the other what the longer-term civic impact is. It doesn't matter to him. If he can get $250,000 a year for killing America, he will take it. So, no doubt about that. So, is he after establishing a media empire? Probably not. Is he after getting paid for lending his name to somebody else who happens to be interested in establishing a media empire? Sure. Is it because media empire? No. You had me at get paid. If it's a peanut butter empire, I don't care what it is. I find that stuff disgusting and beneath me, but don't, put it near me. Just let me have the money from it. That's all he's really interested in. Okay. Take a brief break to answer a question from Rebecca Romans, who's just worried, I guess, and tweeting out the question. Well, here's passing on this bit of breaking news and asking, is it anywhere near me? Armed man has barricaded himself inside a home on Henderson Court in Clifton, Virginia. Police asking residents to avoid the area. No problem for me. I'm not even anywhere near Henderson Court. And, I don't know, Clifton, not that close. It's certainly not anything I need to worry about unless the guy goes mobile and decides to head in my direction. But no, not particularly close. But there's people barricading themselves inside homes, I'm sure, all over Virginia on any given day. Just another one of our armed standoffs that, pepper any morning's news, as I've pointed out on various gun fail segments. If anybody ever had the stomach for it, and to Google News search armed standoff every day, you'd be damn surprised how much of it was going on. It's one of the wider uses for people's guns kept at home that we just don't hear all that much about these days. Anyway, but let me give you a factual answer on Clifton versus me. It's 20, everything's about 25 minutes away from here, just the way it used to be. Anything in northern Virginia, if the traffic's good, 20 to 40 minutes away, which is the same as it is in New Jersey. I find almost anything within driving distance is about 40 minutes away. Beyond that, it's beyond your day trip radius. But you would have to have real purpose in mind to leave Clifton, Virginia, and find your way to where I am. But sorry to hear that that's happening down there. Just another day on the job for cops in gun-crazy America. So, let me sew a little bit more of this narrative together here by going over to Pocket. Now, I have a pile of stories in Pocket. I spent the whole week away and without any opportunity to vent and read these stories and get them out, so they've just piled up. And I kept paying attention and piling things in there as I would peek in on Twitter during the day. Let's see. Trump's real endgame, a white nationalist media empire, was the article we just read. And strangely enough, I had already tucked that one away. But I know in here somewhere there we are. Oh, no. That was, it just has empire in the headline. Something I definitely intend to look in on perhaps later in the week. I'm sure you saw it, the New York Times piece, along with a companion piece that was out this morning. Trump's empire, a maze of debts and opaque ties. So we can get a look at, what does it mean to become a part of Trump's empire in the larger sense, outside of just the media empire question? What about the larger empire question? What does it really mean to be a part of that empire? And the answer is usually that you will end in failure. Their companion piece that was a follow-up today was entitled in the New York Times, What Donald J. Trump Owns and Owes. And that's really putting a finer point on the empire thing, that generally speaking, a lot of things he controls or acts like he controls are not things he owns. This all aimed at the larger question of, is he really a rich billionaire or is he not? And the answer increasingly looks like he's not. But there is in here somewhere, underneath this pile, a closer look at media empires and Donald Trump. And there it is. Okay, I found it here from Politico over the end of last week, I think. We're looking at Michael Cruz piece in Politico, if I have that correct. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Michael Cruz. Again, I'm not even sure where this comes from. When I look at the Pocket view, is that maybe who tweeted it even? I don't even know. But then in Pocket view, it screws everything up, mashes things together. I Survived Trump magazine, barely, is the name of the piece. And right here in this view, it says by Michael Cruz at Politico.com. But now when you open it up, you realize it is in fact by Carrie Purcell. I really don't know. So maybe I saw Michael Cruz tweet the thing and then stuck it in Pocket, filed it this way. Trump magazine. Everybody remember Trump magazine? You don't. That's because it was a piece of crap, and it's what Trump would start in the way of a media empire if he were actually even remotely interested in the media product, which he really wasn't. He was, even here, still mostly interested in licensing the name, but he also saw it. The pitch on this one was, well, it's not going to be us controlling the content, and it's going to be about news and politics. So somebody went to him and said, you're a rich guy and you're a narcissist. Would you be interested in my starting a magazine called Trump Magazine, and it's all about you? And the person, I guess Trump would say, naturally that would be a huge hit, so yes, it sounds profitable, but why would you? Let me ask you this. Here's my shrewd businessman's question for you. Why would somebody like you, a supposedly successful media figure and magazine publisher, be interested in publishing a magazine, the content of which is all about me? Don't you have something to say? I'm sure nobody wants to read about you, but usually, because you're just a schlump, a loser, but usually people start magazines to report on other stuff, and that the content range goes beyond just Donald Trump. Why would that work? And probably the answer was, I don't know whether it will or it won't, but if you back it, I'll get paid for a little while. But long term, if I'm making a pitch for why would people in general, would it be a sustainable model to have a Trump magazine? I would say, look at Oprah magazine. That doesn't make any goddamn sense either, but it's working. Oh yeah, okay, so fine. If Oprah can have a magazine, I can too. So let's read about it. I Survived Trump magazine, barely. The subheader will tell you most of what you need to know, but I'm going to read you the rest of the article anyway. Bills went unpaid. They turned off the electricity. Our paychecks started bouncing. I got cancer. I'm not saying you're going to get cancer if you work for Donald Trump, but you are going to get cancer. And they canceled my health coverage. Here's what it was like to work for Donald Trump's failed magazine by Carrie Purcell in the August 14th, 2016 edition of Politico. By the way, I like the little Donald Trump trick I pulled. I'm not going to say that you're going to get cancer if you work for Donald Trump or support Donald Trump or vote for Donald Trump or like Donald Trump or don't hope for the immediate death of Donald Trump, but you will. You will likely, I'm just saying, it's out there. Cancer, it happens to people. And if it happens to you because you don't hate Trump sufficiently, I warned you. That's all there is to it. Anyway, I had been at Trump magazine, Carrie Purcell writes, for only 4 months when my first paycheck bounced. So, media empire, anyone? I don't think so. We'd heard rumors of the company's financial troubles, but I had no idea how bad it really was until my landlord called me one afternoon to tell me that my rent check hadn't cleared. I logged onto my online banking account and saw, to my amazement, that the magazine I worked for, the one with the billionaires, quote unquote I should say, billionaires' name on the cover, had stiffed me. This is the thing about this. Well, let me finish the paragraph. It had stiffed me. Although it was a stressful moment, the irony was not lost on me. I felt like I was living in an Onion article. Luxury lifestyle magazine can't pay its own employees. Now I'll pause to say, yeah, no duh. Now, of course. But at the time, I don't know what, it was, here's the answer. The next paragraph says, it was the fall of 2006. Probably in 2006, you could have convinced me that Donald Trump was a billionaire and that working for a Trump vanity project was probably a stable undertaking. You know, will Donald Trump pay the bills for Trump magazine? The whole reason for being Trump magazine, it seemed like a pretty good bet. I'm sure all the people who took on work for Trump magazine, just like for any other of his projects, thought they had it made. They thought there was no chance they wouldn't get paid because Trump, to us, was a billionaire. And he was a guy who spent lavishly on his own vanity. And here, if you were serving his vanity, you were going to get paid. If you were selling the most ridiculous, lavish, I don't know, whatever, paint, pianos, glass, whatever it is for the casinos, etc., you would get paid. Sure, there was a natural inclination to pay as little as possible. Sure, there was an inclination to try and work out a good deal. That's what all businessmen do, after all. But he was spending on a vanity project, since all of his projects are vanity projects. So he was definitely going to pay you. Oh, look, just, by the way, Bill in Portland, Maine, tweeting a video of the Niagara Falls zip line, which is one of the few things at Niagara Falls that we didn't actually go in for. We spent all our money doing all of the fun things that there were to do, but the zip line was largely booked, as it turns out. Oh, and have you now deleted that? Did you not mean to send it, or did you mean to send it to somebody else? Sorry about that, Bill. Well, anyway, no harm done there. I've outed Bill as a fan of the Niagara Falls zip line video. Sorry about that. I know it wasn't any of my business. I apologize. Anyway, yeah, one of the few things we didn't do. Now it's back. So, it looked like a fun thing, but it was very expensive and very heavily booked. And my kids were a little bit nervous about that, even though we went on everything else that would lift us up into the air and could possibly come crashing down at any moment. All right, so that aside, finished. Back to the Trump media empire, the last time he tried this thing. And I do think there's a very significant difference in that in that previous venture and the one he plans now. I think there's a much larger potential audience for something that has a broader focus than just Trump and wealth porn. So there's that. And also, the basic Trump approach to everything is, I don't think I care very much whether it's a sustainable project. That's why I'm not owning it and managing it. I'm just renting my name to it. And as long as they pay me, great. And if it runs out after a little while, who cares? Essentially. So I don't think that any of the failure of the Trump magazine or his lack of interest in anything beyond 10 minutes necessarily argues against the idea that he's going to be talked into starting a media empire. I just think we need to watch out. Is he really starting a media empire, or is he just allowing someone else to do it and extracting cash from it? In which case you can expect it to sputter out pretty quickly. All right, so the rest of the story. It was the fall of 2006, and Trump magazine was my first job in journalism, albeit as the receptionist. I'd landed the gig by answering an ad on Craigslist. As all legitimate media empires do begin there. Fresh out of journalism school, I moved to New York with 2 undergraduate degrees, my student loans, some meager savings, and dreams of becoming a theater critic. The receptionist gig paid a paltry $25,000 a year, barely minimum wage, and that was when the checks cleared. Personally, I had never been a fan of Donald Trump and knew very little about the man. I had never seen The Apprentice, and I was hardly a real estate expert. Don't worry, neither is he. The piles of fan mail that arrived at our office addressed to him, filled with adoring testaments to his, quote, genius, amused me to no end. We received handwritten letters asking for money, a formal request for Donald's daughter Ivanka to escort a woman's son to his junior ring dance at the Air Force Academy, and incoherent 6-page rants about the state of the economy and how Trump was the only man who could fix it. One letter stated, "I sincerely hope you will run for president someday." Before I was hired at Trump, the magazine, at Trump, the magazine had already gained a reputation. See, they just italicized Trump, but you can't hear the italics, so I said Trump, the magazine, but the sentence structure makes that awkward because it reads, before I was hired at Trump, the magazine had already gained a reputation, most of which I wouldn't find out about until after it folded, and by that time I had been diagnosed with cancer, and thanks to Trump, lost my health coverage. He seems to like that. Trump has been, from the beginning, the brainchild of a man named, not Donald Trump, but Michael Jacobson. See, this is how these things work. Michael Jacobson, who'd worked in advertising and promotions at Bob Guccione's infamous Lad Mag, as they, for some reason, are saying in Politico, as though it were a British publication, which it's not. Gear. That is to say, not Penthouse. All right? So it's not the... I guess that falls more under the Lad Mag theme than Penthouse did. Anyway, in 2002, Jacobson launched the magazine under a different publisher as Trump World. It lasted just 2 issues, so a good person to launch a media empire with. But for some reason, Trump became interested in doing so anyway. Lasted just 2 issues. By spring 2003, Jacobson was already feuding with his publishers, Lockwood Publications. I wanted to go national. They didn't, because they were spending the money. Jacobson told the New York Post, so he departed to form his own publishing company and took Trump World with him. The timing of the magazine's relaunch in 2004 was fortuitous for both Trump and Jacobson. Coming on the heels of the bankruptcy of his Atlantic City casinos, Trump was enjoying a rebirth. The Apprentice was a hit and about to enter its 2nd season. He had a new casino, Trump Tower, under development in Vegas. In interviews, Jacobson presented the magazine as another new piece of the Trump empire. I brought this idea and concept to Mr. Trump, and I didn't even need to go on The Apprentice. I was hired. He bragged to Reuters. Again, though, the situation is, I'm sitting on what appears to be a pile of money. Just bring me ideas. I'm going to publish a Trump magazine. You're going to have a Trump media empire. I'll buy it. Did he wake up one day and say, you know what? The way to make money in this economy is media. I need a magazine. I look at Oprah. She's got one. I'm going to have one. No, none of that thought went into it. Somebody else just said, I've brought you a thing. If you just put money here, I'll give you a media empire. Okay, I'll take it. If you just put money here, I'll give you a golf empire. Fine, I'll do it. All right. So that's how it worked. He didn't even need to go on The Apprentice. Trump played along. I figured we conquered the TV business, he told USA Today, so I guess we have to go to magazines now, right? He never had such a thought, but he backfilled it afterwards to justify it. Now I'm a media mogul. The magazine was envisioned as a bi-monthly, Jacobson told the New York Times, with a circulation of about 200,000. About 50,000 of those, or 25% of their whole circulation, would be distributed free to residents and visitors to Trump's buildings. Get it? How can I distribute this thing? Even giving it away for free presents a problem because that's a lot of footwork going around and asking for permission to place the magazine in various locations so that people can take it, or getting those boxes, newspaper boxes, and putting them out on the street and working with the city to get the permission to put it out there, and making sure we buy good ones and chain them up to places so they don't get stolen, et cetera, et cetera. No, we have that all built in. We have real estate that we control, so we can actually put them there and distribute them there. And people are already thinking Trump because they're in a Trump building, so their interest will be piqued. It actually makes a great deal of sense, not as a business venture, but in terms of I need to get X number of these magazines out there, even if people use them to line their bird cages. They have that the worst possible distribution plan, I think. But it is free, and we'll take it. So that was the idea. 50,000 of them would be distributed free to residents and visitors to Trump buildings. The rest would show up on newsstands with a cover price of $5.95. If you're dumb, you'll pay. The target demographic was, quote, a reader that buys a lot, that spends a lot of money, Trump told the Times. What could go wrong? He's the human logo, Jacobson told the Village Voices. Hey, look, Ta-Nehisi Coates. He's a branding king, and the magazine will tie all of these branding opportunities into one and then flush them down the toilet. The first issue, believe it or not, featured Melania, then still Melania Knaus, engaged but not yet married to Trump, on its back cover, sporting a diamond opera necklace and an advertisement for a jeweler. So even the ad content that they sold, you want to buy ad space? Yes. But it's got to have pictures of my fiance, who's a model, by the way, and who you can't just have her picture, even though she's a Trump. Don't think you're getting away with this one. You're buying the ad space, yes, but you're also paying her for modeling in it, and you can't have the ad space unless you hire her for it. Isn't that great? What a wonderful vertical integration that was. Although I suppose it's possible that they may have said, I'll give you a discount on the ad space if you use Melania for the model. I don't know. I'm not sure how that really worked that one out. Anyway, about a third of the magazine was dedicated to Trump, his family, and his businesses. And who wouldn't want to read all about that? Trump personally signed off on each issue, unless, of course, anything in there is found to be controversial, at which point he will disclaim interest in all of it. He would mark up proofs with a Sharpie, making sure it contained nothing untoward about himself or his family. The rest? Wealth porn, the magazine's creative and editorial director told the Daily News. Expensive stuff that you wish you could buy, and that Donald Trump may or may not actually have bought for himself, but who cares? But there was lots. That was a proven genre in terms of niche publications. Certainly his entire brand, the success of The Apprentice is built on the idea that people want to see this. The success of the thing that made Donald Trump, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and a number of niche publications as well. Just into, do you want to daydream about Lamborghinis? Fine, here's a magazine that you can do it with. A steady stream of news releases trumpeted the magazine's supposed advertising prowess. In 2005, Trump World teamed up with a travel website to launch The Apprentice-themed cruises. That doesn't even make any sense, but why not? You like The Apprentice? Yeah. You like cruises? Uh-huh. How about an apprentice cruise? What makes an apprentice cruise? I don't know. Everybody on board likes The Apprentice. If you can sell the Nation cruise, then you can sell the Apprentice cruise, right? But by the end of 2005, the magazine had lost more than $3 million, according to Forbes. A tremendous success. In typical Trump fashion, the mogul was still making money. He received a licensing fee of $120,000 per issue in 2005, which was raised to $135,000 per issue in 2006, even as Jacobson's company, Premier Publishing Group, sank deeper into the red. And that could only have helped them sink deeper into the red. Now, bi-monthly, so 6 issues, $135,000 a piece. The math, blah, 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 right? So you probably won't even get away with just spending $250,000 on licensing for the Trump media empire that Bannon, I guess, is dreaming about. It's going to cost you much, much more than that. What could be better than bankrupting Bannon at the end of all this? Then in 2006, Jacobson rebranded the publication as Trump Magazine instead of Trump World and claimed it turned a profit. Trump told CNBC that the magazine was taking off. Why not? All of a sudden it started selling fast. And they said, let's take it to the next level. That's what they have done. Why not? Who cares? No one's going to verify it. Just say that. If the magazine did, in fact, make it to the next level, it didn't stay there for long. Securities and Exchange Commission records would later show that by the end of 2007, the company had accumulated a deficit of $7,361,716, $7.4 million in debt after the next year, right? So, what was it? $3 million lost in 2005, even more in 2006, and by the end of 2007, $7.4 million in debt. But in the fall of 2006, all I wanted, that is the writer of the piece, was an entry-level job at a publishing company with the opportunity to advance. And Trump, essentially a small startup with a tiny office and an informal atmosphere, seemed as fine a place as any to begin. Besides which, Trump, never-ending deep pockets, right? Located on the 16th floor of 386 Park Avenue South, the magazine employed about 20 people, including one alumnus of The Apprentice. Most were under the age of 40. Jacobson, the editor and publisher, was a notable exception. I sat at the front desk with Jacobson's private office directly next to mine, and the rest of the staff located through a small entryway. My job was to answer the phones, handle the mail and messengering, and complete various administrative tasks. Meanwhile, I kept my ears open for any opportunities to write, and for anything Jacobson might yell through the wall at me. One day I had to run into his office and tell him how to spell Chihuahua, even though he was sitting in front of his computer when he asked me the question. Trump magazine itself was gaudy and gauche, with its motto, "Think big, live large," plastered above the Trump logo on the cover. The Trump logo, of course, is the same everywhere. Just a gigantic rendering of Trump. So it's a what do they call those? Type. Well, I can't remember what they. Anyway, it's just the word Trump essentially. They don't even have a standard a font for it, but I guess they like the sans serif fonts, big bold lettering. Okay. So, Trump logo plastered on the cover, and cover lines touting advice on investing and golf. That's what he likes. And boobs, I think. But I don't think he gives advice about that. Each issue was packed with full-page ads touting Trump products, like the Trump Ocean Resort in Mexico. Oh, is that Trump Baja, or is that different? And Trump Vodka. Basically, so these products that only existed because Trump said they existed, nobody could actually buy them anywhere. In most cases, Trump vodka, Trump steaks, Trump this, Trump that. So more vertical integration. The pages were filled with copy about luxury items like Hermes pocket squares, Baccarat Christmas ornaments, personal canoes, is that a luxury item? And 18-karat solid gold Game Boys. Okay. The first issue released during my time there was a holiday-themed affair. On the cover was a woman photographed from mouth to abdomen with a champagne flute positioned between her ample cleavage. It featured a Trump year in review, including a portrait by Annie Leibovitz from Trump's then pregnant wife wearing a gold bikini, Annie, and news of the alumni of The Apprentice. In public, the magazine attempted to practice what it preached. Just 6 weeks after I was hired, I worked the door at a glamorous party the magazine threw at FAO Schwartz, and planning was underway for a big summer event at Trump Casino. I tried to train myself to ignore the magazine's sexist content, which proved difficult, especially when the end of the year Trump-tastic gift guide featured a picture of a young blonde woman. What? Blonde? No way. Wearing a pink baby doll nightie and holding a Trump teddy bear, her mouth suggestively open. It must be the most fabulous, fantastic, expensive pink baby doll nightie ever. So tremendous, so fabulous. And a teddy bear at that. It was even harder to ignore the chaos that was building inside the office. The lack of organization was rampant. Sound like anything familiar to you? There was no company-wide database for subscriptions, believe it or not. All the information was stored in Excel spreadsheets that were emailed back and forth. Staff meetings were few and far between, with little communication taking place despite our close quarters. Jacobson's demands were erratic and always urgent, and often had no clear connection to the publication, including shipping framed paintings via UPS and DHL. I left the office promptly at 5 p.m. every day, but the majority of the staff was still hard at work when I closed the doors. Our creative and editorial director would throw explosive temper tantrums, then threaten to quit, a cycle repeated numerous times during my few months at the company. One time he actually did quit, demanding that the contents of his desk be messengered to him, only to get rehired without explanation. Life is about perspective, the director, Aaron Sigmund, said in a statement when he contacted Politico. My discontent with Michael Jacobson and his financial advisors who controlled the company stemmed from my self-preservation of my professional standing that at that point I had spent over a decade building. Over a decade? Wow. God, that's so long. What an experienced guy. Jacobson was himself a mystery, disappearing for days at a time without explanation. By the way, I'm halfway to a decade building my radio reputation, just in case you all want to compare that to something. Jacobson, I guess, apparently disappeared for days at a time without explanation. The office was frequently visited by his friend, Billy Kay. That's what it says. An obese man who always carried a tiny Yorkie tucked under his arm, who had no official position, and whose presence was never explained. By then, the number of employees was rapidly decreasing. One at a time, the magazine's longtime staffers, including Jacobson's personal assistant, who had been with the company since its first day, found new jobs and left the company. Rumors began circulating about the state of Trump. It's ill. It's got brain damage. And nobody was optimistic. That's when our paychecks started to bounce. The first time it happened, it seemed like an accident, or maybe an oversight. The office accountant quickly issued a new payment and covered the fee for the check bouncing, but then it happened again. And this time the company didn't reissue a check. Instead, I was handed a brown paper bag filled with $100 bills to cover for the company's lack of payroll funds. By then, I wanted a new job, but there was a big reason I couldn't just walk out the door with everyone else. 5 months into my employment, I began taking a lot of sick days, more than the company handbook had outlined. I had to. I had been diagnosed with cancer. It was thyroid cancer, which had a high success rate of treatment. 2 of my friends, in fact, had survived it and were happy and healthy. My real fear wasn't even the cancer itself. It was that I would lose my health insurance before I had finished treatments. When I was diagnosed in mid-March 2007, I immediately met with Trump Magazine's human resources manager. Her advice? Get the treatments over with as quickly as I could because she couldn't promise medical coverage lasting beyond the next 8 weeks. Oh my. So I did. The cancer had already progressed to stage 3, and many of my parathyroids and lymph nodes had to be removed. I began radiation treatments and fortunately recovered quickly. I was going on job interviews while bandages were still visible on my throat. It was a surreal whirlwind. I barely had time to process that I had cancer or that my company was going bankrupt or any of the emotional aspects of the chaos that had become my life. All I cared about was getting through it. The news of my diagnosis had quickly circulated around our small, anxious office, and grateful for the support, I made no attempt to keep it a secret. Former colleagues who had been moved on to new jobs called to ask how I was doing. But even though Jacobson knew what was happening, he never acknowledged my diagnosis. The only time he brought it up was when my mother flew to the city for a visit. He told me I couldn't leave the office to pick her up at the airport because I had taken so much time off recently. Politico, by the way, says they made repeated attempts to contact Jacobson for the comments, but couldn't reach him. Back at Trump, the office had progressed to full-blown dysfunction, with Jacobson disappearing for days at a time. After a few days out of pocket, he would suddenly reappear out of the blue, firing off a frenzy of emails, including memos to the staff assuring us that everything would be fine. Sounds like every .com in the world. And issuing a series of orders for 20 media kits to advertise the company. This turned out to be impossible because we didn't have any ink or paper with which to print them. In the fall of 2006, the company had gone public. Can you believe that? And just a few months later, the phones were now ringing off the hook with concerned stockholders demanding to know about the shares in the company. Their shares. And then came the creditors. Premier Publishing, it became clear, owed money all over town. At least once the electricity was cut off. With no lights to work by, we sat in a circle on the floor like a group therapy session. Eviction notices began to show up. I knew because they didn't go to Jacobson. They came to me, the receptionist. I had to sign forms confirming I'd received the notices from our landlord, but it was impossible to pass them along to Jacobson because I couldn't find him. In September 2007, the company was forced into bankruptcy by its creditors. By then, the SEC records show the company owed Trump $270,000 in unpaid license fees, a small fraction of the more than $7 million it owed in total. And rather than bail out the company, Trump severed his licensing agreement with Jacobson and moved on, relaunching Trump with a new publisher. He bragged to the New York Times that he wasn't putting any money in up front with that version of the magazine either. In the 6 months I worked there, I never met or spoke with Donald himself, and he never came to the office. There's a little more here and a little more about her personal illness, and we'll see what we can fit in before it's time to hand the show over. Surgery over, radiation over, bandages off. I resumed my job search and quickly found a new position, but it turned out I wasn't free of Trump Magazine yet. It found at least one way to affect my life. In an effort to keep up the illusion that I worked for a functioning company, I gave Trump Magazine 2 weeks' notice, only to be informed that my employment had been immediately terminated and I could just pack my things and go. Okay. My new job didn't offer benefits until after my first 90 days of employment, though. This was no small matter. I needed health coverage to continue seeing my surgeon and endocrinologist every few weeks and to fill a prescription for the synthetic thyroid hormone I had to take every day, as well as the various supplements I'd been prescribed to counter the long-lasting side effects of radiation treatment. So I wrote a hefty check for my first month of Cobra and was assured by Premier Publishing that I would have the option of continuing it for the next 90 days. But as with so many other promises Jacobson made, he broke this one as well. A few weeks later, he emailed me to say Premier had been declared insolvent and my medical coverage through United Healthcare had been terminated. My Cobra check would be returned, he said, and he strongly recommended me finding a new carrier for my personal insurance needs. He said he was sorry for the inconvenience. I had 4 days to find a new insurance plan, which proved impossible. Thank God for Obamacare, right? But of course, because of Trump Magazine, I was now a cancer patient without health coverage. And since that cancer could be classified as pre-existing, well, new employers were basically uninterested, and new health coverage pretty much out of the question as well. And of course, employers not willing to pick up somebody with pre-existing cancer treatment on the books either. Anyway, it goes on from there. There's more about it. And there's more about Trump as a person, more about him as a candidate. But of course, it is now time to hand things over to the guys on the after show who have been waiting patiently for me to come back so that they could be after me again live anyway. And it's good to have been back and good to have been able to vent about this one. You get the idea, of course, about what was going on at Trump Magazine, and you can see then, I think that's an important part of evaluating whether or not you think Trump has eyes on a media empire afterwards. I don't think he has eyes on anything in particular except getting paid. There are people around him. The people who we've hired certainly have an end game in mind. I don't know if he cares what it is, just so long as he gets paid. So, it's not out of the question, but you know, whether this has, to portray this as something he's had an eye on all along, that I think maybe takes things too far. I guess that's the upshot of the last hour or so, believe it or not. How about a couple of other news stories for the day? What's going on the after show? Well, let me tell you. How about this? The Department of Justice says poor people cannot be jailed for being unable to pay bail. And that's good news, especially for Donald when his time comes. He can't pay anything. A federal judge in Texas blocks the Obama administration from protecting transgender kids just in time for school. And Louisiana renters and homeowners without flood insurance are facing an uncertain financial future, believe it or not. Yes, we have to get back to that as a topic too, right? For the last half, they'll be reporting on nearly half of the nation's juvenile detention centers use isolation as a form of control. And free-range parenting is a privilege of the white and affluent, as most things are. All those stories and more coming up right after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, thanks for putting up with us with a rambling Monday, our first one back from vacation. It's going to take us a while to get back in the swing of things, but I appreciate your patience with it. And, we'll have to change our focus and see if we can't pay some attention to the natural disaster affecting so many lives down in Louisiana once again. Stay tuned, though, for the after show.